Stepmother sold poor orphan triplets to a homeless man, unaware he is a secret billionaire. The moment Margaret inherited 3 children that weren't hers, she knew exactly what she had to do. Get rid of them. $50 each, she muttered, staring at the sleeping faces of Emma, Jake, and Lily, the 8-year-old triplets whose father had just died, leaving them in her care. $150 total. That's more than I spend on groceries. But this isn't just another sob story about cruel stepmothers. This is about how one woman's greed led to the most expensive mistake of her life. 3 months earlier, Margaret had married David Chen purely for his money. The lonely widower owned a successful restaurant chain, and Margaret played the perfect caring woman who adored his children. The triplets, still grieving their biological mother's death from 2 years prior, desperately wanted a mother figure. David's sudden heart attack changed everything. The will was devastating for Margaret. David had left his fortune in a trust for the children, accessible only when they turned 18. Margaret got the house and a modest monthly allowance, barely enough to maintain her lifestyle, let alone raise 3 kids. "I never signed up to be a mother," she spat, scrolling through her phone. The funeral was yesterday. The children hadn't stopped crying. Emma, the oldest by 12 minutes, knocked on the door. "Margaret, we're hungry. There's cereal in the kitchen. We finished it yesterday, and there's no milk." Margaret's credit cards were maxed out. The monthly allowance wouldn't arrive for 3 weeks. But she'd noticed something interesting about David's will. It said nothing about what happened if the children disappeared. She opened her laptop and typed, "Private adoption services near me." The first website that popped up made her stomach turn. Loving families seeking children. The second was more her style. Quick solutions for unwanted custody situations. The phone number led to a man named Rico, who asked no questions and made one promise. Cash only, no paperwork, no traces. "How much?" Margaret asked. "Depends what you're offering." Margaret looked at the triplets huddled together on the couch, sharing a single blanket. Emma was reading to Jake and Lily from a worn picture book David used to read them. 3 children, healthy, well-behaved. She paused. "What's the market rate?" "For 3 kids? Quick sale, 50 each. Take it or leave it." Margaret smiled for the first time since the funeral. Deal. What Margaret didn't know was that Rico's buyers weren't families looking for children to love. They were people looking for small hands to fit into tight spaces, voices that could beg on street corners, and children nobody would miss. And in exactly 48 hours, she was about to hand over David's most precious treasures to a man who would change all their lives forever, but not in the way she expected. 2 days later, Margaret loaded the triplets into her car with a story about going to meet their new family. "Will we like them?" Lily asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Will we all stay together?" Jake worried, holding both his sister's hands. Emma, always the protective one, studied Margaret's face. "Why are you so happy today?" Margaret ignored the questions, her mind focused on the $150 cash that would solve her immediate problems. She'd figure out the long-term plan later. The meeting spot was a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody asked questions, and the coffee was terrible. Margaret spotted Rico immediately. Gold teeth, expensive suit that didn't fit right, and cold eyes that made her skin crawl. "You bring the merchandise?" Rico asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "In the car." Margaret glanced through the window at the triplets, who were sharing a bag of chips she'd bought to keep them quiet. "They think they're meeting a new family. Smart. Keeps them calm during transport." "Transport?" Something in Rico's tone made Margaret pause. "Where exactly are they going?" Rico smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Better you don't know details." Plausible deniability. Before Margaret could ask more questions, Rico's phone buzzed. He answered with a grunt, his face slowly changing from confident to confused to genuinely afraid. "What do you mean the buyer's here early?" Rico whispered harshly into the phone. "I told you next week. We're not ready." He hung up and immediately started sweating. Look, lady, we need to do this right now. My buyer just showed up unexpected and he's not the patient type. Margaret felt a chill. What kind of buyer? The kind that doesn't like being kept waiting. Rico's hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette. There he is. Through the diner's grimy window, Margaret saw a figure approaching from the shadows. At first glance, he looked like every homeless man she'd ever crossed the street to avoid. Torn jacket, unkempt beard, pushing a shopping cart filled with what appeared to be junk. But as he got closer, something was wrong with the picture. His shoes, visible beneath the ratty pants, were clearly expensive leather. The watch on his wrist caught the streetlight. Definitely not something you'd find in a dumpster. And the way he moved, there was confidence there, authority, like someone used to being in control. That's him? Margaret asked. Rico nodded nervously. Goes by Old Man Chen. Word is he's got unusual tastes. Pays top dollar, asks no questions, but... Rico trailed off. But what? Some kids that go to him are never seen again. Margaret's blood ran cold, but before she could process what that meant, the homeless man was pushing through the diner door. Up close, she could see his eyes, sharp, intelligent, and burning with an intensity that made her step back. Rico. His voice was deep, cultured. Not what she expected from someone who looked like he lived on the streets. I believe you have something for me. Margaret found herself unable to speak. This wasn't just wrong, it was terrifying. Rico fumbled with the envelope of cash. Yeah, about that. The seller here was just having second thoughts. No second thoughts. The homeless man's gaze locked onto Margaret. A deal is a deal. Unless... He tilted his head, studying her. Unless you don't actually have the authority to make this transaction? Something about the way he said authority made Margaret's hands shake, like he knew exactly who she was and what she was doing. I have every right, she said, trying to sound confident. They're my stepchildren. The man smiled, and Margaret realized with growing horror that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. 1 hour later, the triplets found themselves in the strangest situation of their young lives. The homeless man, who'd introduced himself simply as Mr. Chen, had led them not to some dark alley or abandoned building, but to a modest apartment above a laundromat. It was small, clean, and filled with an odd collection of items. Expensive-looking books next to thrift store furniture, a high-end laptop sitting on a folding table, and photographs of what appeared to be business meetings mixed with pictures of the city's homeless encampments. Are you really homeless? Emma asked, her 8-year-old directness cutting through the confusion. Mr. Chen smiled, the first genuine smile they'd seen from an adult since their father died. That's a complicated question. What makes someone homeless? Not having a home, Jake said matter-of-factly. Then yes, I suppose I am. This isn't really my home. He gestured around the sparse apartment. I'm just borrowing it. Lily, still clutching her stuffed rabbit, whispered, Are you going to hurt us? The change in Mr. Chen's expression was immediate and profound. He knelt down to her level, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. No, sweetheart. No one is ever going to hurt you again. I promise. There was something about the way he said it that made all 3 children believe him completely. Over the next few hours, Mr. Chen proved to be unlike any adult they'd ever met. He listened when they talked. He answered their questions honestly. When Jake mentioned he was hungry, Mr. Chen didn't just order pizza. He taught them how to make proper fried rice using ingredients he somehow had in his sparse kitchen. My father used to make this, Emma said quietly, taking a bite. David Chen, Mr. Chen said, not looking up from the stove. Good man. Great cook. All 3 children froze. You knew our daddy? Lily asked. We met a few times. Business meetings. Mr. Chen's voice carried an emotion they couldn't identify. He talked about you constantly. Emma the protector, Jake the peacemaker, Lily the dreamer. He was so proud, Emma's eyes filled with tears. Then why didn't you stop Margaret from selling us? Mr. Chen turned off the stove and faced them. For a moment, his carefully constructed homeless persona slipped, and they glimpsed something else underneath. Pain, anger, and a determination that was almost frightening. Because sometimes to save someone you have to let them think they're lost first. Before the children could ask what that meant, there was a knock at the door. Mr. Chen checked his watch, an action that seemed odd for someone who supposedly lived on the streets. "Right on time," he murmured, then louder. "Children, I need you to stay in the back room for a few minutes. There's someone I need to speak with." Through the thin walls they heard voices, Mr. Chen's and a woman's. The woman sounded official, professional. "The paperwork is complete," she was saying. "Emergency custody granted based on evidence of neglect and abandonment. Margaret Walsh has been arrested on charges of human trafficking and child endangerment." "And the children?" "Safe, thanks to your unconventional investigation methods. Though I have to ask, was pretending to be homeless really necessary?" Mr. Chen's laugh was rich and warm. "Detective Morrison, sometimes you have to go undercover to catch the real criminals. Margaret wasn't the first person Rico approached about selling children, and she won't be the last, but now we have enough evidence to shut down the entire operation." Emma pressed her ear closer to the door, her heart racing. Mr. Chen wasn't just some random homeless man. He was working with the police. But why? And how did he know their father? The conversation continued, but one phrase made her blood run cold. "The DNA test confirmed it. You were right about David being your brother." Uncle Chen. Their father's brother they'd never met. The one who disappeared years ago after some family argument their father never talked about. Everything suddenly made sense. And nothing made sense at all. After Detective Morrison left, Mr. Chen returned to find 3 children staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to hope to outright suspicion. "You heard," he said. It wasn't a question. Emma crossed her arms. "Uncle Chen?" He sat down heavily on the folding chair, suddenly looking less like a homeless man and more like someone carrying the weight of years of regret. "Your father and we had a falling out. A stupid, prideful argument about money and family responsibility. I said things I shouldn't have said. He said things he probably didn't mean, and then we were both too stubborn to apologize." "So you became homeless?" Jake asked. "Not exactly." Mr. Chen reached into his jacket and pulled out a wallet. From it, he extracted a business card and handed it to Emma. "I became someone else." Emma read the card aloud. "Chen Industries, Marcus Chen, CEO." She looked up, confused. "This is you?" "The company your father and I built together before our fight. After we stopped speaking, I threw myself into work, built it into something bigger than either of us ever imagined." He gestured around the sparse apartment. "But success without family felt hollow. So I started spending time on the streets, working with homeless outreach programs, trying to understand what really mattered." Lily climbed onto his lap with the fearlessness that only children possess. "If you're rich, why do you look homeless?" "Because when I heard what happened to your father, when I learned about Margaret and what she was planning, I knew the only way to save you was to become someone she would never suspect." His arms tightened protectively around Lily. Rico's operation had been selling children for months. The police needed evidence, and Margaret needed to believe she was in control. Emma was working it out in her head. "You pretended to be a buyer so you could catch them. And so I could get you away from her safely." Mr. Chen's voice broke slightly. "I failed your father when he was alive. I wasn't going to fail his children." Jake, ever practical, asked the question they were all thinking. "What happens now?" Mr. Chen smiled, and for the first time, they saw their father's smile reflected in his face. Now I'd like to take you home. Your real home." He stood up, still holding Lily, and walked to the window. You see that building across the street? The tall one with the lights? They looked. In the distance, a gleaming skyscraper rose into the night sky, its top floors blazing with warm light. That's Chen Industries. And the top 3 floors. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Your father designed them as a family home. For when we reconciled. For when you kids came to visit. He turned back to them. It's been empty for 2 years, waiting for the right family to bring it to life. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. I mean you're not just getting a guardian. You're getting a family. And a home that your father built with love even when he thought he might never see it filled with children's laughter. The shabby apartment suddenly felt different. Not like a hiding place or a way station, but like the first step on a journey home. But there was still one thing that needed to be finished. Mr. Chen's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and smiled grimly. Margaret's been released on bail, and she's just discovered that the children she sold for $150 are about to inherit a fortune that makes her monthly allowance look like pocket change. He looked at the triplets with an expression that was part uncle, part CEO, and completely determined. How would you like to see justice served? The next morning, Margaret Walsh stood in the marble lobby of Chen Industries, clutching a hastily written legal document and wearing her most expensive dress. The security guard had told her that Mr. Marcus Chen wanted to discuss custody arrangements for the triplets. She'd done her research overnight. Chen Industries was worth billions. If Marcus Chen was related to David, and if he wanted custody of the children, she could fight it. She could claim emotional distress, demand compensation, maybe even get a cut of whatever inheritance was involved. Margaret smiled as the elevator rose to the penthouse floors. This might work out even better than she'd planned. The elevator doors opened to reveal a space that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was elegant but comfortable, clearly designed for a family. And there, sitting around a massive dining table having breakfast, were the 3 children she'd sold for $150. But they looked different. Emma wore a beautiful blue dress that actually fit her. Jake had a new haircut and was laughing at something on a tablet. Lily was coloring in a book while wearing what appeared to be real gold jewelry sized for a child. At the head of the table sat Marcus Chen. Gone was every trace of the homeless man from the diner. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Margaret's car. His hair was professionally styled, and his bearing screamed wealth and power. Mrs. Walsh, he said, not standing. Please sit down. Margaret's mind raced as she took the offered chair. Mr. Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. These children are legally in my custody and... Actually, Marcus interrupted calmly, they're not. He slid a document across the table. Margaret's hands shook as she read it. Emergency custody order. Child abandonment charges. Human trafficking investigation. This is impossible, she whispered. Is it? Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. You sold 3 children to a complete stranger for $50 each. In legal terms, that's human trafficking, the penalty for which in this state includes up to 20 years in prison and forfeiture of any financial interest in the victim's assets. Emma looked up from her breakfast. What does that mean? Marcus smiled at her with genuine warmth before turning back to Margaret, his expression ice cold. It means Margaret has lost any claim to your father's trust fund. Every penny will go to you 3, as your father intended. Margaret felt the room spinning. How much money are we talking about? The restaurant chain was valued at $47 million last year, Marcus said casually, buttering a piece of toast. Of course, that doesn't include the real estate holdings, investment portfolios, or the life insurance policies. Jake looked confused. What's $47 million? Lily, with 8-year-old logic, tried to help. It's like a lot of ice cream? Marcus laughed. Yes, sweetheart. A lot of ice cream. Margaret stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. This isn't over. I have rights. I was married to their father. For 3 months. Marcus said, still not raising his voice. To a man you manipulated and deceived. A man whose children you sold to human traffickers for grocery money. He finally stood, and his presence filled the room. Mrs. Walsh, you sold my niece and nephews for $150. Do you know what they're actually worth? Margaret shook her head, afraid to speak. Nothing, Marcus said simply. Their worth isn't measured in dollars, they're priceless because they're family. Something you'll never understand. He walked to the window, hands behind his back. However, since you seem interested in numbers, let me give you one to remember. The reward for information leading to the conviction of Rico's trafficking ring? $1 million, which I'll be donating to children's charities in David's name. Margaret's face went white. You set me up. I saved them. Marcus turned back to face her. Security will escort you out. If you attempt to contact these children again, if you come within a mile of this building, if you so much as search their names online, you'll discover exactly how ruthless a billionaire can be when protecting his family. As if summoned, 2 security guards appeared at Margaret's elbows. As they led her toward the elevator, she heard Lily's voice. Uncle Marcus? Will we really get to live here forever? Forever and always, little one. This is your home now. The elevator doors closed on Margaret's shocked face, and Marcus Chen sat back down to breakfast with his children. The city sparkled below them, full of promise and possibility. Emma looked at her uncle seriously. Thank you for saving us. Marcus reached over and took her hand. Thank you for letting me be part of your family. And for the first time since their father died, the Chen triplets were truly home. 3 months later, Rico and his entire trafficking network were sentenced to federal prison. Margaret Walsh was convicted of child endangerment and lost her appeal for any portion of David's estate. And in the penthouse of Chen Industries, 3 children learned that sometimes the best families are the ones that find you when you need them most. Sometimes the people who look like they have nothing are the ones with everything to give. And sometimes a deal that seems too good to be true is exactly the mistake that changes everything.